All right, it's good to be with you guys this morning. Just to prep you, I did bring some $20 Chick-fil-A gift cards. We're going to play a little trivia, a couple different games throughout the morning, so you can already start thinking and processing what you need to do to win. But I want to start with a Bible verse. Can anybody quote John 14:6? All of you should have raised your hand. Okay, what's your name? Oh, yeah. No. Yes, third row. The man I'm looking at. Yeah. What's your name? Casey. What's John 14:6? It's John 8:32. You're a genius. I knew you could do it. Good job, Casey. Okay. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father except through me. The second sentence is a claim of exclusivity, that Jesus is the only way to the Father. But note Jesus says he is truth. We're going to spend a little time this morning talking about truth because this is the number one thing being attacked in culture, right? If you look at all the nonsense that people are trying to navigate and deal with, people are trying to find truth. They're trying to understand what truth is. And Casey already brought up the second verse. The reason why truth matters, Jesus said, you will know the truth and the truth will make you or will set you free. Truth ultimately brings freedom. And for people that are being lied to, that are believing lies, they're bound up by the deception from that lie. Truth is what brings freedom to people, but here's the real question. How do we know what truth is? Or who gets to determine what truth is? Right? If you think something's true, somebody else thinks it's not true, who's right? How do we know what truth is? I'm going to show you guys a video clip. You might have seen part of this before. The Daily Wire did a documentary called What is a Woman? Has anybody seen that before? Yeah. Okay, have y'all watched that in school? No, just independently? Okay. I want to show you part of this clip. Is when Matt Walsh goes in and talks to a professor, and he's asking what should be a very simple question. Now, if you don't know, a woman is an adult biological female. That's all, right? That is what a woman is. It's a grown-up female human being. It's not a complicated thing. But here's part of this clip of Matt Walsh talking to a professor.
In gender
right? Where people cannot answer some basic questions because if you don't have a foundation for what truth is or where it comes from, then it becomes purely subjective. And so then who are you to say what something is or isn't? This is the challenge. And I want to point out, if you go back to our nation, when the founding fathers got together, they started with the premise, right, in the Declaration that we hold these truths to be self-evident. Truth has to exist or you have nothing that you can gather around, right? I would point out in this school, there is a belief that truth exists. That God is real, Jesus is real, right? The Bible is true. There are certain truths that we can gather around, but in the modern culture, right, they would say, wait a second, right? Truth, isn't that subjective? Don't people get to determine that for themselves, right? This is the challenge that we are dealing with in culture, and I want to point out, if we look at culture, how do most people determine what their truth is? Well, it's what they feel. It's what they think. It's what they want it to be, right? This is the way it makes me feel. It's what it means to me. This is not any kind of consistent or objective standard for truth or reality, but this is what we're dealing with. Now, I want to point out, if you go to Scripture, there's actually an interesting parallel between something that happened. You remember when Peter is with Jesus and they're going along and Jesus actually tells Peter, hey, the Son of Man is going to go. He's going to lay his life down, the ransom for many. He's going to be crucified, but then he will be raised to life. And Peter's like, Jesus, we ain't going to let him touch you, right? Forbid it. We will not let them crucify you. And Jesus tells Peter, get behind me, Satan. You are a dangerous trap. Now, let me go and read this. I'm going to put it on the screen in Matthew 16:23. This is Jesus responding to Peter after Peter said that, hey, we're not going to let you be crucified. We got your back. We're going to help take care of you. Jesus turned to Peter and said, get away from me, Satan. You're a dangerous trap to me. Now, let me pause. I don't know what grade you're in, so I don't know how much Bible you've done yet. If you don't know, Satan's the bad guy, okay? So when Jesus says, get behind me, Satan, Peter is his disciple, okay? And I want you to think through this. All Peter said is, we don't want you to die. And then he gets called Satan. That seems pretty intense for what happens. Now the verse continues. It says, you are seeing things merely from a human point of view and not from God's. Why did Jesus tell Peter he was Satan? Well, more specifically, right? He's addressing the issue of how Peter is trying to resolve the problem. But what he says is, you're seeing this merely from a human point of view and not from God's point of view. I want you to think about this. Peter's heart was he didn't want to see Jesus die. Did Peter have a good heart? Yes. Right? Like if you went to your friend and you're like, hey, I'm thinking about dying. If your friend isn't like, no, don't do it. Like, don't do it. We love you. We care. Like if they don't say that, they're a terrible friend. Right? Like you should not have them as a friend. If they're like, yeah, we were thinking the same thing. You should do that. Just go for it. Like that's a terrible friend. Okay? Peter is being a good friend. He's like, no, we don't want you to die. And Jesus is like, Satan, you get out of here. That's kind of intense for calling someone Satan because they don't want you to die. But he tells them, you're seeing this only from a human point of view and not God's. Why? Because it's possible to have a good heart and not have God's heart. Because the very reason Jesus came was to lay his life down as a ransom for many, right? That he would take on the sins of the world, that he would be crucified, right? Dead, buried, resurrected 3 days later. He conquers death, hell, and the grave. Like this is all part of God's plan and God's story. But the reason I bring it up is it's very possible in our culture that you can be motivated by a good heart and miss God's heart. Why? Because truth is not about what something makes you feel. It's about what did God say, right? What is God's standard? What is God's plan? Not just how does it make me feel in this moment. And this is where if we look at truth, the thing I want to get to and dig a little deeper on is who determines what truth is, right? Is this something, because every one of us individually, do we all determine truth for ourselves, or is there something beyond us that we determine truth and help us navigate? I don't know if you remember back in 2021, this guy's name is Bubba Wallace. He is a NASCAR driver still, but it became very significant news because at his NASCAR event in his garage where he was keeping his car, there was a noose in his garage. And he was like, the KKK has come back and they're sending me a signal and they want me to die. So everybody in NASCAR rallies around him and they're like, we will not tolerate racism. And so the way NASCAR works is the person who gets the very front spots in the line is the person who is the best racer. So they're going to get out to the front. They have the best speed, and you're seated. Your car position is based on how good you are of a racer. Well, his car is usually at the back because he's not one of the better racers, okay? But on this day of race day, all the NASCAR drivers were like, no, bro, we support you, we're with you. So they get behind his car and they walk his car to the very front of the NASCAR line because we're going to honor you, giving you a spot. Well, this became such a big deal. The news media covers it that the FBI sent 14 agents to go investigate to see who put the noose up in his garage. Well, then as the story begins to unfold and people are saying it's a hate crime, that all this was racism and all these things are going on, a picture comes out showing the noose. And the noose was not hanging in the garage. The noose was on a rope that was on the bottom of the garage door. It was the handle, the strap for pulling down the garage door. So it wasn't like a noose that was hanging up, and it's not a noose that like tightens when there's pressure, so like tightens on somebody's neck and they would die. No, this was just like a knot that was tied, and it did kind of look like a noose, but when the FBI goes to investigate, the FBI found that this had been up almost 2 years before he was ever assigned this spot. Many other drivers had used this same spot for their cars, and so this was not a knot that was tied to be a noose to threaten him in a racist act. So then the news covers, hey, this is not a hate crime. But of course, the media is like, now we know it's not a hate crime, but how do you feel? Are you okay? Do you still feel like you were targeted, even though you weren't? And it becomes a very feelings-oriented thing. Well, this is where it got even crazier. The FBI's reported this was not a hate crime. This was there for 2 years before he was ever, or like a year and a half before he was ever assigned in the garage. And yet, you had really brilliant spokesmen like LeBron James. After this happened, he tweeted and said, no, I don't care what the FBI says. This was a hate crime. It was not a crime, and it was not motivated by hate. So no, that is incorrect. Why would he tweet this after it's clearly like the FBI, 14 agents assigned to this case, and they said, no, it wasn't? Because in his mind, right, truth is subjective. Well, no, I still believe it was a hate crime. I still believe it was racist. That's not how truth works, okay? It's not just what you feel, what you think. In fact, anytime someone looks at the reality of the situation, they're like, no, I don't accept that. I don't receive that. And they start saying dumb things like this. It reminds me of a video clip from a movie that every time I hear someone say something really, really dumb, this is the clip that runs through my mind. I don't know if you've seen this before. I'm going to show it to you. And it might be something that you just need to repeat in your mind when you hear people saying really dumb things. Here's the clip.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic.
Class, if one of your classmates says something dumb, but it is an appropriate video for this dumbness. Now, here's what I want to break down for you. We live in a culture that says, no, truth is up to the individual. Okay, so this is Ben Affleck, apparently with one of his muscle cars, and my car does not have a gas tank in the bumper, but apparently his does. So he's going to fill this up with gas. Now, if you drive, I know California's a little different because there's all these EV mandates, and so I don't know what kind of vehicle you will end up driving. But let's just say, right, you are driving a vehicle that still takes gas. It's an unleaded vehicle, which means it can only operate on unleaded fuel, okay? It's kind of important. If you are driving a vehicle and there's this magical gauge, and this gauge drops down to E, and the light comes on, and it's like, you better put some more fuel in this. If you go to fill up, can you put whatever you want in that gas tank? Who says no? You racist bigots. How dare you say, here's the deal. Like, I know, private school, you're elite, cool. Not everybody has the money you do. Gas is expensive, right? What if somebody, like, water's cheaper than gas? What if somebody wants to get like a water hose and put it in their gas tank? Who are you you water deniers? How dare you say that somebody can't put water in their gas tank. Okay, this is the way the attack works. It is idiotic, but this is the way it works. Who are you to say what somebody can and can't do, right? With their body, with their stuff, whatever it is. And the reality is, it's not that you can't put water in the gas tank. You can totally put water in the gas tank. But will that vehicle work? If you put water in the gas tank, it will not work the way it's intended to work, right? Now, that's not subjective. That is the reality. In fact, every single vehicle, when they are produced, they come with an owner's manual. And the owner's manual says, here's the way it works. If you want to get the best operation out of this vehicle, right, you change the oil ever so many miles, you put this kind of gas in it. There's all these things that are encouragements and recommendations for how to get the best life out of your vehicle. Here's what you have to know. People can choose whatever they want to choose. But there is an owner's manual for life. And that owner's manual is pretty clear on the way things work the best and the way you get the most fulfillment, enjoyment, and satisfaction out of life. You don't have to do it that way. If you want to put water in your gas tank, you can put water in your gas tank. It just won't work as well as you want it to when you try to do it that way. This is how reality actually works. This is the way truth actually works. And this is something that should not be as complicated as we've made it in culture. In fact, it should be some of the most basic, simple things ever, right? Questions that didn't used to be confusing. Like, is there moral truth? Of course there is. Of course, rights and wrongs actually exist. But if there's moral truth, where does it come from? Who determines what is morally right or wrong? I want you to think about this. Because there's only a couple options. I'm going to walk through those in a second. But there's only a couple options. Where does truth come from? Who actually decides? Because if man decides, right, well, what if we decide different things? What if somebody decides that sexual assault is okay and somebody decides it's not? Right? What if a guy decides it's okay and the girl says no? Who's right? I mean, understand. If truth is purely subjective, then who gets to be right, who gets to be wrong? This is the problem with this subjective perspective, and it doesn't even matter. Like, can't everybody just do whatever they want to do? Well, how's that going to work in society? If it is anarchical, like there is no truth, right? There's no morality. It's up to every individual what they do. Or can we just vote on it? Let's just vote and have society determine what's right and wrong. These are pretty basic questions, and yet this is something that is very challenging right now in our culture to navigate because people aren't sure. There are only three options for truth, okay? And this is something that I hope you remember going forward because this is what we are struggling to navigate in culture. The only three options is either there are no rules, which means truth is subjective. It's up to every individual. Every individual determines for themselves what is right and wrong. So either there are no rules or we make them up. Now this is called collective morality. So you have subjective morality, collective morality, where that society, we determine and we vote on them, or you have an objective standard. This is what's given by the Creator. Only three options is either subjective, collective, or objective. Now, why does this matter? Because if it's subjective, then who gets to tell you you're wrong? Nobody. Because I determined it was right. Okay? How is that going to work? Well, let me walk you through this. As we try to navigate, how do we determine truth? Right now, people don't even know basic rights and wrongs anymore, and it's so ridiculous that what should have been the easiest thing ever, we've made complicated. Are there moral rights and wrongs? Yeah. Okay, but who decides? Is it subjective, collective, or objective? And this is where you can talk to any of your friends who might be trying to navigate this. And let me give you a couple examples to make this really easy. In Orlando back in 2016, there was a shooting in a homosexual nightclub. The largest mass shooting in American history. 50 people were killed. 50-something people were injured in this shooting. Now, the news media didn't want to talk about the fact before this guy went in, he yelled Allahu Akbar, and then went in and started mowing people down. They're like, we don't know what motivated him to do this. Like, really? It's on video. He's yelling something before he goes in and shoots, but okay, we don't know why he did this. But let me pause you for a second. This was a Muslim man that did this, and this Muslim man believed that homosexuality was wrong. And for strict adherence of the Muslim faith in Islam, homosexuals are supposed to be put to death. So was this guy right or wrong? Well, it depends on who determines what truth is, right? Because if truth is subjective, can you ever tell somebody what they do is wrong? No, because to them it was right. So for someone to go into a school, to go into a nightclub, to go into a church and start shooting, well, who are you to say? Well, if truth is subjective, this is the problem, okay? If truth is subjective and every individual determines for themselves what's right and wrong, then nobody can ever be wrong, because if they determined it was right, then it must be right. Well, the other option you have is collective. But can a collective society agree on something that might fundamentally be wrong? Sure. You understand that for most of the world history, collective society agreed that slavery was good? That is incorrect, right? Well, we can go through lots of examples. Collective society, you know, in Germany, collective society voted for Hitler and the policies of Hitler? Germany voted and approved those things. Now, a lot of them didn't know how far it would go when they were voting on that, so that kind of surprised them when it went that far. But can a collective society be wrong? Yes. Then is that the best way to determine right and wrong? No. So the only other option is an objective standard of morality beyond humans that we don't get to determine for ourselves what is right and wrong. And this is where then the question is, what is the best objective moral standard? Because there is more than one objective moral standard. Jews would say it's a Torah. Christians would say it's a Bible. Muslims would say it's a Quran. Those are objective standards that individuals cannot come in and subjectively change things they do and don't like. But then, if we agree that objective standards is the best option, well, then the question is, what is the best of those objective standards? Now, anytime you want to measure somebody's religion or faith, a good thing to do is consider who is the hero of the faith. So for Jews who follow the Torah, who is the hero of the Torah? Moses. Okay? For Christians who follow the Bible, who is the hero for Christians? Jesus. For Muslims who follow the Quran, who is the hero of the Quran? Muhammad. Now, Moses was an actual murderer, right? Muhammad was someone who encouraged and promoted slavery, who actually had multiple wives, had a child bride, right? Who encouraged killing all of your enemies. Like, you can go through all kinds of stuff, and then you had Jesus. Well, which one of those seems to be maybe the better example to follow, right? Now, again, those are objective standards of faith and of morality, and there are still clearly defined winners in the objective standard category. But again, here's the point, is as we are trying to navigate this, understand that what you are seeing in the world around you, the craziness, the chaos, ultimately is people trying to find truth. And you have to know, as Christians, that we have, by every available metric and measurement, we have the best answer for what people are looking for, because we know what truth is, we know who truth is, we know where truth comes from, and this is the way you navigate as we go forward. Now, I'm going to dive into a little bit of American history, but I want to start with some trivia, and I want to do some gift card giveaways. So I need some participants in my trivia game. Who wants to play a little game and win a $20 Chick-fil-A gift card? I need a freshman, a sophomore, a junior, and a senior. Who are freshmen? Let's start there. There's one freshman in all of school. What is your name? Say it again. G-Day? All right, come stand up here with me. All right, who are the sophomores? There's one sophomore. Y'all are so brave. I'm so proud of you. You're just the most courageous people ever. Okay, who are sophomores? Raise your hand. There's got to be more than like 3 sophomores, okay? Are you a sophomore? Are you? You are? You don't want to talk about it? I'm not going to make you. Are you a sophomore? You are? Okay. I'm not calling you up. You were just like, Okay. Are you a sophomore who didn't raise your hand? Okay. I was a youth pastor for 10 years. I was a camp. I didn't call you up. No, I just said, are you a sophomore? Oh my gosh. Okay. Why are y'all like awing? Nothing happened. Like, aw. Okay, settle down. I'm just going to tell you. I was a camp counselor for 7 years. I was a youth pastor for 9 years. I was a high school teacher for 6 years. I see everybody, right? So the people that are looking down, not looking, like, I notice you. Just because you think, like, oh, he can't see me. I'm in an elevated position looking down on all of your rows, okay? You can't hide. All right. So you're a sophomore, even though y'all don't like to raise your hands. Who else is a sophomore? Raise your hand. No, like, yeah, fourth row. Y'all's hands are like behind people's heads. They're like, I'm a sophomore. No, that's it. Okay. So, and now you're a sophomore too. Okay, raise your hand, sophomore. Is there any volunteer from a sophomore? And if not, I'll call on somebody. Who wants to volunteer? Who's Julia? Okay, well, I saw 2 girls who were willing to volunteer. What's your name? Nope, pink headband. Okay, come on. You raise your hand. All right, who's a junior? Okay, so the juniors are mostly on this side. No juniors on this side. Okay. All right, are there any junior volunteers or any calling somebody? You volunteer? All right, come on. Okay, now let me just, come on. Let me just stop. Guys, if I only have girl volunteers, you bunch of cowards, right? Come on. All right. Who are the seniors? Okay. What did you say?
We didn't say anything. We're just laughing at it.
Okay, good. Let's make fun of them. I love it. All right. What's your name? Josh, come on. All right, this is not guys against girls. This is every individual for themselves, just so you know. Okay? Just so you know. No, you don't know, because you don't know what kind of trivia we're doing. Now, here's what we're going to do. I am going to show an image on the screen, and the first person to raise their hand gets the first guess at the answer, okay? Now, this is not like a collective group assignment, okay? You don't get to help them. And you also need to know, anytime you're in front of people, your brain like deactivates in certain levels. Where like if you were sitting there, you'd be like, it's so obvious, we know that. And up here, you're like, I don't remember that, I don't know. That happens to everybody, okay? Don't help them. They have to figure this out on their own. So if you raise your hand first, you get the first guess. If they are wrong, then I'll go to the second person I saw raise their hand. Now, y'all can't help me. If you see who raises their hand first and I didn't see it, you can tell me which one raised their hand first, okay? So let's start with something pretty easy, okay? All I want to know is who this person is. Now, the first one to raise their hand, I got them back up where I can see it, buddy. First one to raise their hand gets the first guess. So watch the screen, not me, all right? You probably want to uncross your arms so like you're ready to raise them, right? Okay. All right, so who is this person? Okay. Yeah. No, the actor's name, yes, not Spider-Man. Tom Holland is correct. All right, so you get 1 point. Okay. All right, so watch the screen. All right, who is this person? Yeah? Who is it? LeBron James, right? All right, this isn't hard. Okay. Although I am curious that a couple people didn't raise their hands, but yes. All right, who is this person?
I do.
That's a valid question, except she's legit. Okay, is his hand up again? Okay. Caitlin Clark is correct. Okay, who is this? Does anybody else want to play this game? Okay, was it him again? Okay, who is this? Stephen Curry. Is that 4 for you? Okay, he's like, it's not even hard. All right, who is this? What's crazy is she started with her hand on her head, and he started with his hand down, and his hand still almost came up first. Okay, did she get it this time? Okay, who is it? Taylor Swift. Okay, who is this? Do you know? Who is that? Morgan Wallen. Come on, you're on the board. All right, so it's 4-1-1. And you're about to get one. I sense it, right? Here's the deal. I actually appreciate the fact that you raise your hand and you're like, oh, who is that? I'm proud of you for not knowing. That is, I respect you more. Okay, I saw your hand first. Harry Styles, yes. Had one of y'all gotten that right, I would have felt worse about you. So that's great. Okay, so 2-1 for almost. All right, who is this? He's crushing it. Yes. Jake Paul. Yeah, he's like, oh, yeah, it's no big deal. Okay. He just raises his hand automatically. It's like, I know everybody. It's fine. Patrick Mahomes. Okay, is that 6? Okay, bro, impressive. All right. Okay, I do not know who got it. Whose hand went up first?
I had my hand like this, but I didn't like raise it.
Okay, I need a less invested person, so not a student. Is there a teacher? Josh? Okay. Is correct. On the board, come on. Yes. It's almost your doppelganger. All right, who is this? Yes, it's correct. Is that 3? All right, you're almost kind of catching up. Okay, who is this? Here's the deal. Your hand was up first, but then you pump faked, and when it came down, other people's went up. Whose went up? Josh is correct. I'm not sure how I feel about you knowing that one, but that's fine. Okay? You're not a fan?
Oh, okay. Whoa. It's my favorite player at this point.
Right, I'm going to subtract. Oh, who's this?
Luka Doncic.
It is Luka. Okay? Josh. Ryan Reynolds is correct. Okay, so now 2. We're coming on. He just started with his hand up. That's ridiculous. Yes. That is dude perfect. Okay, is that 7? 8? Oh, yeah. Okay. All right, the rest of you got a lot of catching up to do, right? You just got to know that. Now, that is George Washington, okay? Yeah, now I just want to know if y'all know history as well as you know pop culture, okay? So who is this person? No. It is not John Jay. Okay, girls, you have the only guesses left. It is not. He wrote a pretty famous document in American history. You've already guessed. I mean, yeah, he wanted to declare something. It's Thomas Jefferson, yeah. Okay. Your hand was up first. You're really close. It is not John Jay. The person has like the most famous signature. Oh, I couldn't tell. Your hand was already up? Yeah. It is John Hancock. Yes, the president of Congress. Okay. So is that 2 now? Oh, because you had Jefferson. I forgot we gave you credit for that one. Okay. Who is this? Your hand was up first. That is Alexander Hamilton. Okay. Is that 10? 9. Okay. I think Josh. Oh no. Oh no. Yes, Abraham Lincoln. Okay. Whew, that was going to be bad for a minute. All right. Yes. That is Frederick Douglass. Okay. Your hand was up first. That is Christopher Columbus, yes. That is, in fact, a man that we are looking at. Okay. He just starts raising his hand no matter what. I like your strategy. Yes. That is Betsy Ross. I like that it's this most weird, arbitrary picture of somebody riding a horse, and they're like, oh, only one person rode a horse. For sure we know who that is. Okay. Whose hand went up first? I know. Yeah?
Me?
Yes. Oh, she pointed right to you. I don't know. I don't know whose hand went up first. I was busy making fun of people. Okay. That is, in fact, Paul Revere. Yes. Famous silversmith. Okay. I saw your hand first. That is King George III. Okay. Super impressive. Pop culture and history. I like that his hand's like, I know. I know. Was it his again? Oh, it was on this side. I mean, I didn't see. It was a teacher. Which one? Yes. That is, yes, Adolf Hitler. That is correct. Okay? Here's the deal. There's only a couple of famous documents in American history, right? Like, it can't be that hard. Okay, what is this one? That is like the Declaration of Independence. Yes, that is correct. Okay. Josh? That is the Constitution. Now, here's another really famous one that's a little different. Now, I'm going to help you out. This was done, I see your hand, this was done in 1863. That is the Emancipation Proclamation. Very, very well done. All right? Now, this is kind of more arbitrary big picture. What is this? Okay. Yeah, Statue of Liberty, super easy. The Liberty Bell, you know the Liberty Bell. They pointed over here, I'm not sure which one they pointed to. Okay, Liberty Bell. Here's the deal, at this point we're just playing for fun because nobody's catching up. All right, who is this? That is Mount Rushmore. For bonus, can you tell me who the people are?
So the first one's Washington.
Yep.
The second one's Jefferson.
Yep.
Then Teddy Roosevelt.
Yep. Then Lincoln. Bro, that was one of the most impressive ownings of this. Thank you for everybody that participated in the slaughter that just occurred. The good news is, I do have more, and we will come to another one in a second. Wow. I've never seen a so one-sided battle in that trivia game. But here's the thing. As we talk about American history, what I want to point out real quick is that I totally get the fact that as we dive into some of these stories, some of these kind of realities of American history, that a lot of people are like, man, we don't like history, right? Because history is not viewed as a very cool thing. And I would say, I would get if we're like, hey, at lunch today, let's go get a really cheap, terrible burger. Do you want to go to Burger King or McDonald's? And you're like, I don't care, they're both terrible. Correct. Right? Like, it doesn't matter. They're no good. Or if we're like, hey, right, who's your favorite basketball player? Who's some of the best? And I intentionally left Kevin Durant in the Brooklyn Nets because he every 2 years changes teams, and I'm not keeping up with what team he's on now. It doesn't matter. He's ridiculous, right? But we could talk about, right, who some of these people are right now. Anthony Edwards, just unbelievable in the playoffs, but I would digress, okay? As we look at, right, different sports, or sports in general, right? And you're like, hey, what's your favorite sport? And for some people, they're like, sports is dumb. I don't care. I want to read books. Okay, fine. That means you're not athletic, but whatever, okay? So I get it. That's fine, okay? But it's totally fine if you're like, I don't care about that. some things it makes sense not to care about. But for people that are like, well, I don't care about America, that makes no sense to me. If you live in a nation, you should probably care about and maybe learn something about the nation you live in. And today, there is more disinterest in learning the story of America, learning the reality of America than ever before. Anybody know what that 248, what that number means in regard to our nation? It's how many years this 4th of July will have been a free nation, 248 years. 248 years ago is when the Declaration of Independence was done. We became a free nation. Why does this matter? We are one of the youngest nations, historically speaking, in the history of the world, and yet we have the oldest constitution in the history of the world. Average constitution in world history lasts for 17 years. Ours has been going on longer than anybody else's in the history of the world. We've enjoyed more stability, more blessings and benefits as a nation than anywhere else. And not only do we enjoy stability, if you look big picture at America, there's 45 million legal immigrants that are currently in the U.S. There's about 1 million immigrants legally added to the U.S. every single year. And right now, just over the last 3 or 4 years, estimates are that there's more than 10 million illegal immigrants that have crossed the southern border. Okay, now, I'm not trying to get political. I'm just pointing out, this is what the estimates are over the last several years. Here's something that's a question worth asking. The modern narrative is America's this really, really bad nation. Okay, here's my question. Why do so many people want to live here if America's so bad? Right? Because part of the argument is, well, America's this really, really racist nation. You understand the majority of the people that are immigrating to America, the majority of the people crossing the southern border are not white. If America's this uniquely racist nation, why are so many non-white people trying to get into this nation if we're so racist? Well, maybe there's something more to the story than what the accusation is. And this is where, let me just walk you through a few realities of America. Do you know that in America, we enjoy more prosperity? We only have 4% of the world's population, globally speaking. We have 4% of the world's population, and yet we have 25% of the world's wealth in America. 25% of the world's GDP comes from America. Gross domestic product, where the world's wealth comes from. We are one of the wealthiest nations, arguably the wealthiest nation in the world, given population. There's nothing like it. In fact, if you live in America, you are more likely, and this is according to the Department of Commerce, the Census Bureau, they did a census, and every 10 years they do a new census, and what they determined is that you are more likely to have a telephone, more likely to have a television, more likely to have an air conditioner, more likely to have an automobile, more likely to eat more red meat and have more square footage of living space than if you lived in the middle class in Europe. And that's for people that live below the poverty line in America. If you live in poverty in America, you're more likely to have those things than the middle class in Europe. And why does that matter? Because the middle class in Europe, that's the second wealthiest place in the world behind America. And people that live in poverty in America are more likely to enjoy a higher standard of living than the middle class anywhere else in the world. So there are people who are coming from South America, Central America, who are going, if we could just go live in poverty in America, we would improve our lifestyle. And they would. Why? Because if you look at the world, according to the World Poverty Bank, half of the world lives on less than $6.85 a day. A quarter of the world lives on less, it's 1.9 billion people, they live on less than $3.65 a day. That's how much they make in a day. And that's what they live on. That's a quarter of the world. In America, the standard of poverty is, if you are a family of 4 and you make below $40,000, you automatically qualify for every single government assistance program that exists. And that government program, the assistance program, it's the equivalent of more than $60,000 a year in benefits that you receive. So you can live somewhere where it's 365 pennies by 365 days. That's not very much money. Or you can come to America where in poverty, you can live such a higher standard than where you left. There's a reason people want to come to America. Because things are actually far, with all of the problems, with all of the chaos, with all the problems, issues, troubles we have in America, things are still way better here than almost anywhere else in the world. Now, there are some other nations that are doing some things better than we are. That's for sure. That's because we're doing a lot of really dumb things right now. But still, this notion that America is like the worst nation ever, that doesn't make any sense. If we're so bad, why are so many people trying to get here? And let's go a little further. Do you know that right now the number one issue for most of the world is malnutrition and bad drinking water? So they're trying to get enough food, enough sustenance just to survive every single day. Every single year, there are millions and millions and millions of people from Africa, from Asia that will die of dysentery, which they get from not having clean drinking water. They will die of starvation from not having enough food in their bellies, right? This is the issues around the world. Do you know the number one health concern for people living in poverty in America? It's obesity. Specifically, it's from eating really bad foods that have this really high saturated fat content. Do you know what kind of food that is? That's the kind of food you get from McDonald's. So the biggest problem for poor people in America is they have too much McDonald's. The biggest problem for poor people in the rest of the world is they have nothing at all. No clean water and no food at all. Again, I just want to give you perspective to understand when people talk about all these things, compared to who should be an important question for us, right? America's so bad. Compared to who? Compared to China? No. Compared to Russia? No. Compared to Saudi Arabia? Nope. Right? I mean, let's go through. Compared to who? And this is one of the questions we don't ask nearly enough, but let me go a little further. If you look at the issue of natural disasters, every year in the world there are natural disasters, whether it be a hurricane or tornado or mudslides, volcanoes, whatever. There's natural disasters that happen all over the world every single year. Well, it's worth looking into. There's different kinds of nations in the world. There's Christian nations, Muslim nations, Buddhist, secular, Hindu nations. There's all kinds of nations in the world. Well, if you go just for an example, if you go back to the earlier 2000s, over in Indonesia, there was a tsunami. And the tsunami devastated, completely destroyed, wiped out Indonesia. Indonesia, by the way, is a Muslim nation. When the tsunami hit Indonesia, it's interesting to see what nations responded to help, because they're a Muslim nation. Logically, what other nations should respond to help them? Muslims. Guess who did not send any aid, effort, or relief? Muslim nations. In fact, neither did the secular, the Hindu, the Buddhist nations. It was only nations that were identified as Christian nations, and specifically, America sent more aid, effort, and relief than every other nation combined. Just several years ago, when this incredible tsunami hit Japan, same thing. America sent more aid, effort, and relief than every other nation combined. And we do this every single time it happens. And this is why, if you look throughout the nation, there are so many organizations set up to help people in need. And part of the reason is, right, like literally, we have organizations where you can buy a milking goat, right, for a family in some other nation of the world. You can buy them chickens that lay eggs. Like we have organizations that we spend money to help people around the world be able to survive. And part of what we do, right, is because we have a heart for people. We care about people. We want to make sure people are taken care of. And again, like organizations entirely designed that if you spend money with us, we will take money and we will help people around the world. And so we have all of these efforts, all these projects that have gone on in America. Well, part of the reason is we recognize that we've been blessed and we want to take from our blessings. We want to help people around the world. That's a really, really great thing. How many other nations do this? You understand that in Africa, they don't have different missions organization to help the poor people of America, right? You can help buy them shoes for their feet, help buy them a goat, right? So they can have some milk, so they can have with their breakfast. Like this is something pretty unique in America. China doesn't do this. Russia doesn't do this, right? You pick another major nation, they're not doing this. This is something pretty unique to America. America responds. If we see a need, if we see people are in need of help, America responds to try to help them. And this is what we used to know, and what used to be said often is America's a really special place. When we say America's exceptional, that's what it means. America is a special place. Not to say we don't have lots of problems, because we do. And yet with our problems, we still have more opportunities, more blessings, more abundance here than really anywhere else in the world. Here's my question is why? Why do we, and have we historically enjoyed so many blessings? And this is where I would go back and say, if you look at America, every 4th of July, like people celebrate fireworks and all these fun things, food, family, games, whatever happens. If you go back to why do we even celebrate 4th of July? Where does this come from? The founding fathers, when they when they work to create America, part of what they do, when we separate from King George III, we become our own nation. We do it through the Declaration of Independence. And the Declaration of Independence, they lay out the philosophy of American government. And the second paragraph says, right, when Jefferson writes this, phrases that probably we know and remember, he said, we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, that to secure these rights, government is instituted among men, deriving their just power from the consent of the governed. The premise of America is that there's some truths that are so obvious that we're created equal. That we have rights that come from God, that government exists to protect our rights. Like these truths, they're self-evident. They're obvious. Everybody should know these things. And I would point out that those truths are not nearly as obvious as we might be led to believe in America. If you ask most people, hey, do you think that we should have equality? Oh yeah, we should have equality. We should be equal. Some of these truths are obvious in America. They're not obvious in the rest of the world. Do you know in India, they still to this day have a class system? Because they largely believe in reincarnation. And if you lived a bad life, when you die, they believe you're reincarnated back at a lower level. And they literally believe that if you're in an upper level, you should punish people in a lower level. Whether, right, you're just say bad things about them, you throw things at them, you disparage them. Like they literally think we should punish those people because they lived a bad life last time. And so this reincarnation life, they're back, they're at a lower level. They don't believe in equality. If you go to any major Muslim nation in the Middle East and Africa, they don't believe in equality between men and women, much less between the Islamic faith and people that are not Islamic. Now, also to give a little context in this, just a couple years ago, Saudi Arabia passed a new law where when they passed this law, people in America were like, they have equality in Saudi Arabia. The law they passed was they allowed women to drive for the first time in their nation. For the first time. And they're like, now we have equality. And I'm like, hang on. That's not what the law said. The law said women can drive as long as the girl's father or the woman's husband is in the front seat beside them giving them directions. It's not really equality, right? That's the reality. In major Muslim nations, they don't believe equality between men and women, much less between anybody else. Like these notions, when we say, well, these are obvious, it's obvious that we are all created equal. No, these are not obvious truths to most of the world. In fact, it wasn't obvious to King George III, which is why we separated, because we were like, you're not doing any of this and we think it should be done. These truths are only obvious to people that actually know what the Bible says. Where do we get the idea that we're created equal? Well, Genesis 1, 26 and 27. It tells us that God made them in his image. Male and female, he created them. The reason we believe in equality has nothing to do with someone's race, their gender, their ethnicity, their cultural heritage. That's not what equality comes from. Value does not come from whatever your sexual preference, gender identity. No, that's not where value comes from. Value comes from the fact that we were all made in God's image. That's where value comes from. Well, that's what the Bible teaches. This is why the founding fathers could say that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that we're all created equal. Well, it's a self-evident truth if you know what the Bible says. Similarly, if you go in Genesis, when Adam and Eve are in the Garden of Eden, does God give them the freedom of speech? Yeah. God actually even gave them the freedom of religious choice, the rights of conscience. That God said, right, you can eat of any tree, the fruit of any of these trees, but there's one, don't. God gave them a choice, and they actually chose to reject God's standard, but God gave them the freedom of religious choice. You can start looking from the very beginning in Genesis all the way through. God was giving rights to people from the beginning. So why did the founding fathers believe that we had God-given rights? Because it's what they saw in the Bible, that God was giving rights to people. And why does that matter? Because if God was the one that gave the rights didn't come from government, right? It wasn't like there was a king telling Adam and Eve, you may freely speak. Nope, there was no king. There was only God. And God is the one that gave them those rights. The rights don't come from government, they come from God. To go a little further, when you see the very first time in Scripture that there is an ordinance from God pertaining to the government, it's a civil ordinance, it's after the ark lands on Mount Ararat, Genesis chapter 9, with Noah. Noah gets off, and God makes a covenant with Noah, and God tells Noah, if man sheds blood, by man his blood will be shed. What does that mean? It means if somebody murders somebody else, then the rest of the people who are living They were going to have a trial and they were going to execute that person. That this was a government ordinance that we're not going to let murderers get away with this. But why did that matter? Because what did a murderer take? They took someone's life. Well, one of the very first of the God-given rights is your right to life. If you're not alive, none of your other rights matter. So they said, we're not going to let somebody come and take somebody else's life. But this is where we get the idea that government exists to secure those rights. Okay? As we're going through this is also understanding all of those rights come from Bible understanding. The founding fathers go way deeper in what they thought their rights were, and they can link them all back to the Bible. If we talked about where do our rights come from and what Bible verses can you give with all the different rights we talk about, most of us would have a hard time identifying what Bible verses those were. Let me give you a quote from John Quincy Adams. He was the son of John Adams, grew up during the middle of the Revolution, but here's one of the things he identified. He said, with regard to the history contained in the Bible, it is not so much praiseworthy to be acquainted with it as it is shameful to be ignorant of it. Meaning, it's not impressive if someone knows the Bible, but it's really embarrassing if they don't. Now, that's the way it was in their culture growing up, but I would tell you this too, as a Christian. Okay? If you've been a Christian for more than 3 years, how many of you have read the Bible cover to cover? Good. Do y'all do that every year, every 2 years? Every 2 years? Cool. Do you do it because the school and your pastor makes you? Now, you're like, no, I just love she does that much. Cool. In the founding era, they would average reading the Bible at least once a year. All it takes is 3.2 chapters a day, and you get to the whole Bible in less than a year. Okay? I'm only pointing out it's not as hard as sometimes we think it is, because the Bible, it's not that big of a book. But here's what I want to point out. Most Christians have never read the Bible cover to cover. Ever. Most Christians have no idea what the Bible says. And let me go a little further. If, for some of you, you determine you want to go to college, and you go to college, I would challenge that you ought to do a little survey. Ask your friends that you meet at college. Ask the people you're in class with, have you ever read the Bible? And many of them be like, oh no, I wouldn't read that book, whatever accusation they might give. Okay. What is the number one best-selling book of all time? And it's not even close. In fact, it's a best-selling book every single year. Nothing comes even close to how many Bibles are sold every single year. There's no work of literature that has been more translated into more languages, it's been more printed, more published, right? That's had more production runs of it than the Bible. Here's what's interesting. There will be people that graduate from college that will say the Bible's dumb and they've never read it. How can you consider yourself a fully educated person if you've never read the greatest literary work ever written? Well, if you've never read it, then your education is lacking, because it is the number one all-time bestseller book, right? And you think you're really smart. You've never read the Bible? You should read the Bible. Now, kudos to you guys for reading the Bible. It's so important to know what the Word of God says, but understand that as you learn the Word of God, that puts you in a category that in modern culture makes you special. That used to make you average. Our culture has gone so far the wrong direction that now it's really special to know the Bible. It didn't used to be special. It used to be average. And here's where we have challenges in modern culture. In modern culture, the two main problems we have is people don't know the Bible and they don't know history. And so much of what we're doing, why do people embrace, like today, 75% of college students surveyed had a favorable view of socialism. How can you have a favorable view of socialism? Because you don't know history at all. You understand, the 20th century alone, there's more than 100 million deaths that are linked to socialist, communist, Marxist regimes and governments. And yet there's people like, no, well, socialism just hasn't been done right yet. If we do it the right way, no, there is no right way. Right? Socialism will always lead to poverty, to death, and to destruction. That is the reality of this Marxist idea. By the way, to link Marxism, communism, socialism is correct. Because socialism is soft communism and Marxism, but is the road to Marxism. That is how that works, and that is even how it was described back in the era of Karl Marx. They described it that way. They knew what they were doing. This is the way to get the foot in the door to introduce this. This is our challenge. Now, I want to point out, if we are trying to navigate, we have to know history, we have to know what the Bible says for us to properly navigate culture. one of the things we have to do is we have to be able to discern truth from a lie. So if we look at things today like, well, but wait a second, the founding fathers, like how can we say they were good people when we know the founding fathers were all these racist, bigoted slaveholders, right? We know they were all these bad people. How do we navigate that? Because were the founding fathers all racist, bigoted slaveholders? Well, I mean, were they or were they not? Well, no, they weren't. Here's the problem. This is the most famous painting done of the founding fathers. This is, there's a little more than, I think there's like 42 guys in this painting, which actually, the painting is cut off. There's a few more guys standing over here in the real painting. But there's approximately 40 guys in this painting right now. Most people believe things about the founding fathers and they have no idea who they are. So, this one's open to anybody. Can anybody find 5 people in that painting? Okay, I see one hand. I'm gonna come back to you. I just want to see if anybody else thinks they can do it. But I'm gonna give you the first guess. Not yet. I want to see, does anybody else think they can find 5? Or only one person? Now here's the reason I bring this up. All of those are known portraits. Every single one of the people in that painting are known individuals. But how do we know who they were or weren't? How do we know what they believed or didn't believe if we don't even know who they were? Okay, so 5. Now you've been to Patriot Academy, right? Okay, so you've seen me play this game before. All right, stand up. All right, now, describe them and I will try to highlight who we're talking about and you tell me if that's who it is or not, okay?
The easiest ones, Benjamin Franklin with the black right next to the door.
Benjamin Franklin.
And then just to the left, George Washington. And then
Hang on. There you go. George Washington, commander of the military, didn't sign the Declaration. Yes. So Jefferson.
Adams to his left, the bigger one, and the shorter one.
The bigger, shorter one. Okay, I got it.
And then if we go to the men sitting in the row over there, I believe that's Richard Henry Lee, the closest one to us. That's correct.
Okay, closest one to us. I'm not sure which way we're talking about.
The row in the back over there.
On the left or right of the painting?
The left-hand side.
Okay, left. So back here.
And down one. Is that Richard Henry Lee? Or
I'm going to give it to you.
was it?
I believe it is, but it depends on which painting this is. But yes, Richard Henry Lee usually sits in this chair, but John Trumbull did 2 different paintings, and I think that this painting, that Richard Henry Lee is sitting over here, but in the other painting, he's sitting right there. So that's why I'm going to give it to you.
And then just to his right, I believe it's Samuel Adams.
Samuel Adams is the second guy sitting down. Okay? Very well done. That is 5. It curved. It was. Okay. Hey, I want to point out, knowing 5 is not that hard, but most of us, like even right here, there was a committee of 5. These guys are the ones who drafted the Declaration. Does anybody know who these 2 guys were? You want to guess? Yes. Who were the other 2 guys? So the committee of 5, they're the ones standing at the table. Jefferson's presenting the original draft of the Declaration. Who were the 2 guys standing with him? So on the right, you have Franklin. Jefferson's wearing the red vest. The one on the left is John Adams. But there's 2 guys between Jefferson and Adams. Who were those 2 guys? One of them is one of the most noted founding fathers. The only founding father to sign all 4 governing documents in American history. The Articles of Association, the Declaration, Articles of Confederation, and the U.S. Constitution. And then he was a member of the first Congress that drafted the Bill of Rights. So the most noted founding father. Yes, so we already found Franklin, Jefferson, and John Adams. We're looking for who is that guy and who is that guy. Roger Sherman is the one who signed all those documents. Now, if you know the other guy, lunch is on me. Okay, he's super impressive. Really great guy. Okay, the other guy, well, you had to know both of them. She already got one. So now she's the one that's a chance. Okay, the other one, his name is William Livingston. Okay, it was Sherman and Livingston were the two guys there. Here's the point. Like, these are not unknown people, but if we don't even know their stories, when someone says, yeah, but we know all the founding fathers, they were these racist, bigoted slaveholders, like even now. So of all these people up there, who do you know that had slaves? Who had slaves? Jefferson. Whoa, I even knew where to put the circle, right? Okay, who else had slaves? I will point out, I have no other circles waiting to drop because nobody gets the rest of them right. How do we know all the other founding fathers had slaves if you don't even know who else had slaves? Okay, now usually someone's like, George Washington had slaves. And I'm like, yeah, but he wasn't in the painting, right? Let me point out for you, of the 56 signers of the Declaration, 41 are accused of at some point having slaves in their lifetime. Now, I think that's a little skewed because there's two of them that their father died, they inherited slaves in the family, but then their other brother took over the family business, and so then they moved off and they never had the slaves with them. But they're like, no, when they were kids, they had slaves. Okay, they lived on a plantation where their family had slaves, right? But again, that's a little different than what you're accusing them of, like being an individual slave master themselves, right? Nonetheless, 41 are accused of at some point in their lifetime having slaves. What nobody talks about is how many of the 41 actually came out against slavery or founded abolition societies to try to stop slavery in their colony or their nations, and how many of them actually funded those movements. So for example, Benjamin Franklin and Benjamin Rush are the two guys who helped found the original 1774 Pennsylvania Abolition Society. In fact, Benjamin Rush then worked to found a national society to end slavery, not just in Pennsylvania, but in all of the 13 colonies, which they did end slavery in many of those colonies. Benjamin Franklin then joined with Francis Hopkinson. They started a school specifically to educate black people in Philadelphia, which at the time was illegal under the king. Because at that point, the majority of black people in America were slaves, and they said, we're not going to educate slaves because the quickest way to have a revolt is to educate your slaves, and we don't want to educate slaves because we don't want to revolt because we want to keep our slaves. Interestingly also, in the southern states, it was illegal to educate any black people until after the Civil War, when the laws were changed in those southern states, which we could go into some of those details later, but I don't want to go on that rabbit hole right now. So these guys started a school to educate black people at a time when it was illegal to do so. We can keep going. Stephen Hopkinson was the governor of Rhode Island. The reason he's wearing that hat is significant because he was a Quaker, and Quakers were known for wearing those hats. Well, also, Quakers were known for always being against two things: war and slavery. Actually, he got removed from the Quakers. He got kicked out because he supported the American Revolution, among other things. But he was the governor of Rhode Island that in 1773, he signed a law against the slave trade and against slavery. The king vetoed that law in 1774. When we separate from Great Britain in 1776, he then is the only British appointed governor that was chosen to be a governor by the American people in that colony. So he's the only one that got to be governor again. And in 1776, they brought back that original anti-slavery law that the king had vetoed, and they are the first state in America to pass an anti-slavery law. That was done by a founding father, a former Quaker who's removed because he supported the American Revolution, but Stephen Hopkinson. You have people like John Witherspoon, the president of Princeton University, who, Princeton at the time was a Bible college. He brought in a black minister to train the primarily white students. He also let black students come and attend classes at Princeton. Now, the reason this matters is if you're going to say, well, these guys were so racist. Okay. If you are a racist white dude, are you going to bring in a black pastor to come teach in your Bible college? Nope. Are you going to allow black students to come and attend your classes? Nope. When you actually go back and see who they were and what they did, it doesn't fit the narrative of what's being told about them today. Or people like William Ellery, he and Rufus King, or let me back up. He and Rufus King are the two guys at the Constitutional Convention who actually proposed that we should stop all slavery in further territories. Well, when the Northwest Ordinance is done and adopted, signed by George Washington, it said that no new territory could join the Union having slaves. He's the guy who got that added, saying we don't need any more slavery. We need to stop slavery. We shouldn't have slavery. No new territory should have slaves. So nobody joining the Union, joining the original 13 colonies, could have slavery. William Ellery did that. You also have James Wilson, who in his law books, he started one of the very first law schools in America, University of Philadelphia. They were actually the second law school in America, but he is the main professor there. And in his law classes and lectures, he taught that slavery was a violation of the laws of nature, that slavery violated the way what God intended to be, that God didn't want slavery. So he's literally teaching all the lawyers of America that slavery is wrong. And again, the reason this matters is because today people want to talk about, well, yeah, but the founding fathers are racist, and they're going to accuse a few that had slaves, and they never tell the rest of the story about what about all the ones that came out against slavery. And because we don't even know who they were, we don't know their stories, so we don't know, well, did they have slaves or didn't have slaves? If they had slaves, did they free their slaves or did they keep them their whole life? Like we don't know their stories, and yet most Americans believe the accusations because they don't know the truth. What is the easiest way to believe a lie? To not know the truth, because then you don't know it's a lie, right? You think, well, this is what it is. And if a lie is repeated loud enough and long enough, most people think it's what it is, even though that's not necessarily what actually happened. Let me go a little further. If you look at the original colonies, right? And this is where you have the Northwest Territory up here. When America becomes a nation, we separate from Great Britain. Well, all of the anti-slavery founding fathers from the northern colonies are actively, ardently working in slavery. And by 1804, every single northern colony had passed laws for the abolition of slavery, making the northern states the first major region in the world to practically abolish slavery. Now, why does this matter? The only reason it even took till 1804 was because of New Jersey, and then New York was I think the year before them. It took them a little longer to figure out that we should end slavery, but England didn't end slavery till 1833. Every single northern colony in America ended slavery more than 30 years before England did, with the exception of New Jersey, which that was 30 years before England did. This is something a lot of people don't talk about. We'll go a little further. When Thomas Jefferson actually became president, in 1807, America became the first nation in the world to pass a ban on the slave trade. He signed it March 2nd, 1807. England didn't sign that law until March 22nd, or March 27th, 1807. We were more than 3 weeks before England in ending this, or passing a law to abolish the slave trade. To go a little further, at the end of the War of 1812, one of the peace agreements we had with Great Britain is that our navies would work together, and they would go off the coast of Africa. They became known as the African Squadron, and our U.S. Navy from 1819 till 1861 patrolled the coast of Africa fighting against the slave trade, trying to stop the slave trade coming out of Africa. And this is all stuff well documented, well known. So for years, for decades, we were trying to stop the evil of the slave trade. After all the northern colonies in America had already abolished slavery, well, we were also the fourth nation in the world to abolish slavery. It happened in 1865 with the 13th Amendment at the end of the Civil War. England did it in 1833, then France and Denmark, then America. We're the fourth major nation in the world, and at that time, there were 128 nations in the world. I want to give you perspective. If you are in a race, and there's 128 people in the race, and you come in fourth place, we'd be like, that's amazing. You did so good. You got fourth place. Today, people say, oh, America, we were so bad because we had slavery till 1865. We came in fourth place. Right? That's actually really, really impressive. And the northern states ended slavery way before that. Well, let me give you even a little more perspective. Do you know that slavery still exists today? This is what's called a global heat map, showing nations where slavery is still active. The more green you are, the better your nation is against slavery. The more red you are, the worse your nation is on the issue of slavery. And if you actually look in 2021, there was a study done from the UN. There was 193 member nations present, and they found there were 94 nations that still had not passed laws banning or outlawing slavery. Do you know slavery is still legal in many nations in Africa and Asia? Like, slavery is still legal all over the world. And yet in America, there's people saying America's so evil because we had slavery like 150 years ago. Right. There's people still having slavery today. And in many places, it's well known they have slaves. It is well known in China, there are slaves. It is well known in North Korea, there are slaves. It is well known in nations in Africa, there are slaves. It's well known. But today people are like, but America's so evil. Okay, again, like compared to who? Compared to who are we so evil? Because we came in fourth place, right? We were leading the charge in so many areas. And actually, it's estimated there's more than 40 million people enslaved today, which is actually more than at any point during the transatlantic slave trade. There are more people actively enslaved today. And this includes, right, sex slavery, child slavery, whatever kind of slavery you can imagine. Yes, all those numbers are included in this. But let me go back to this heat map. You see at the bottom, it says government taking the most action. And the top nation is the Netherlands is number 1, United States is number 2, and taking the most action against slavery. Why does this matter? Well, the Netherlands are number 1 by percentage, but not by volume. The U.S. is number 1 by volume, and it's not even close. Again, why does this matter? Because if you look big picture at the story of slavery, we started legal opposition to slavery before any other nation in the world. We actually paid a higher price in ending slavery than the nation in the world because slavery ended in America at the end of the Civil War, which, to give you, again, a little thought, we are the only nation where white people fought a war against other white people, and at the end of the war, they freed all the black people. We're the only nation in the history of the world that's done that, okay? And then we also still do more to oppose slavery today than virtually any other nation in the world. America has one of the best anti-slavery records in the history of the world. But today, people don't talk about the good, the positive things America's done. They say, but no, but America's so bad, America's so evil. Here's where I want to bring you back to. When you hear accusations, when you hear nonsense, what should you do? And for example, to hearing the founders were racist, I would say no. That's just like you've heard of fake news, that's fake history, right? That's not in fact correct. It's not who the founding fathers were. They actually were, the majority of them, very anti-slavery, anti-racist. There were a couple that actually were racist. Georgia, South Carolina, New York had a couple that actually were racist. But the vast majority of them were very anti-slavery, very anti-racist. But how do you navigate this? So I want to finish by giving you some thoughts and questions. Okay, when someone says something, now this is important. If someone makes a claim, the burden of proof is not on you to prove them wrong, right? The impetus is not on you to show they're wrong and what their claim is. The burden of proof is on the person making the claim, right? Now, I see some of you nodding. Is this a class you have? Have y'all already gone through this? Or are some of you really smart? You're like, I already know this. Okay, do y'all have a class on this? I'm so proud of you guys. You're the best. What class do you have on this? What video did you watch? Okay, and who did it? Oh, you were saying a name. I did not understand that. I thought you were saying the Great Gogurkol. And I was like, I don't know who that is. That's awesome. Okay. All right, so you've seen some of this. Let me walk you through this, right? If someone says this claim like, well, we know America's racist, well, all the founding fathers had slaves, whatever it is, right? You hear these accusations. You should respond not by trying to prove someone wrong. You should just try to get more information and let them try to defend their position. So I'm going to give you some ideas of questions. These are not like the win every conversation questions. These are just examples of how you can ask some honest questions. So for example, someone makes a claim. Well, we know all the founding fathers were racist. How do we know, right? This should be the first obvious question. Now, when I ask, how do you know? What I'm really asking, I want to know what source do you have, right? Where do you get your proof? Well, it's all over the internet. Like Wikipedia said it was. So your source is Wikipedia, right? Like that's how you know? Okay. We can walk through why that's not a reliable source, why no college professor will allow you to cite that, and probably, hopefully in your school, you can't cite Wikipedia either, right? It's an open encyclopedia that anybody can write anything on. So that's not a credible source. I was leading a tour one time in Washington, D.C., and I had a group of high school students, high school seniors. We were on a bus tour. We were doing the monuments at night, and we were pulling up the Jefferson Memorial. And the tour guide said, this is the Jefferson Memorial, and Jefferson is the one who famously gave us a separation of church and state to make sure that we would never have religion in politics. And I've already been with these students several days. We've already gone through like a lot of history and I mean, probably they're like you, right? They're a very smart group of students, but we're on this bus. I'm at the very back of the bus. Tour guide's in the front. The tour guide says this, like Jefferson, he wanted to keep religion out of politics, out of government. And like half the students are like, ooh, and they turn around and look at me and I'm like, shh, be cool, right? Like guys, settle down. So I say, okay. They have some teachers in the group. I say, hey, y'all go in. There's 5 inscriptions to Jefferson Memorial. Go read those, and I'll come in a minute. I'll tell you who he's writing to, what those were about, but y'all go check it out. I wait on the bus. I wanted to make sure it's the last one off the bus, and I wanted to strategically make sure that there's nobody else. So when I ask my questions, the tour guide is not feeling threatened because there's a group of people watching, right, where he might not know the answer. But I also know that I'm not trying to embarrass or shame somebody, right? I want to know you only deal with 2 kinds of people, generally speaking, in these situations. The intentional or the ignorant, right? The ignorant, they're repeating what they've heard. They don't actually know, right? You can have very good-hearted people that have bad information, and so what they're saying is ridiculous, but it's not because they have bad hearts. It's because they have bad information. So am I dealing with someone that's ignorant, or is this someone intentional? Like, does this guy actually know, and he's just saying nonsense, being intentionally misleading and deceiving? So I want to know who I'm dealing with. So I go up and say, hey, sir, so I'm helping lead this group of students, and I heard you mention separation church and state, and I'm so glad because I've been trying to figure out where, I know Jefferson said that, but like where did he say that? Because I want to show the students and be like, see, here it is, he said it. Do you know where he said this? I'm asking the question, right? Are you intentional or ignorant? This is what I want to know. And he's like, oh yeah. He said, Jefferson wrote that in the Declaration of Independence. So instantly I'm like, all right, ignorant, very clear, you know nothing, right? And I'm like, oh, well, I actually had the students read the Declaration of Independence before he came, and it wasn't in there. No, I'm lying. We didn't actually do that, right? But I'm playing the game. So I'm like, we read it, it wasn't in there. He's like, it wasn't in there. I was like, I know, I couldn't believe it either. I thought for sure. I was like, I don't know. Do you have any other ideas? He's like, ooh. And he thinks, and he says, I bet Jefferson wrote that in the Constitution, which... Jefferson was in Europe when the Constitution was written. Jefferson had nothing to do with the Constitution, right? So like really, the guy is showing his ignorance hardcore. Like he is doubling down. He's going to be a proper idiot. So he's like, no, he wrote in the Constitution. I'm like, woo. I said, so actually, we read the Constitution too, and it wasn't in there. He's like, oh, he said, maybe it's in the Bill of Rights. He's just grasping, right? He's like, maybe it's in the Bill of Rights. And I'm like, and again, in my mind, I'm like, that's part of the Constitution. But I'm like, oh, well, no, we read that too. It's not in there. I said, see, this is my problem. I've read all these documents and I can't find where it comes from. Now I know it came from a letter he wrote to the Danbury Baptist, January 1st, 1802, where they were concerned about losing their religious freedom. He's like, hey guys, don't worry about that. Like, I know how this letter goes. I've read this letter many times, but I want to know if he will finally be honest with me and be like, kid, I don't know where this letter comes from, right? So I just want to know, how far are you going to go with this? And I'm happy to play this game with you. So he finally is like, I'm not sure. I know where it is. And I'm like, that's awesome. Where is it? He says, it's inside the Jefferson Memorial. It's one of those things that Jefferson wrote. It's in one of the inscriptions. I said, this is perfect. I said, hey, would you come in and I'll gather all the students around and you can show us which one it is. Like, I'm totally setting this dude up. Like, I know it's not in there, right? And he's like, oh, I can't leave the tour bus. I said, sir, don't worry. I'm going to find it. It's going to be perfect. Thank you so much for your help. So I go inside, and it's not in there, right? So I'm telling the kids about all the inscriptions. We go back, and I make sure as everybody gets on the bus, and I'm the last person on the bus, he's standing by the door. He sees me waiting, and he lowers his head and just starts doing this, like, oh, man. And I said, sir, I read all the inscriptions, and it's not there. And for the first time, he's honest. He says, okay, son, I actually have no idea where this came from, where that quote came from. This is just what they want me to say. I said, oh. So you don't actually know what you're talking about. Oh. I said, don't worry about it. I'll Google it tonight. I bet I can find it on Google. Now, what I was trying to do was plant a seed. Like, just go look it up real quick. Because it's not the time to be like, actually, sir, I'm kidding. I'm really smart. I know the answer. Here's the answer. Like, that's not going to go well, right? But I wanted to plant a seed. Like, you can go look it up and find this. This is a discoverable piece of information, not hard to find. You can find this. And if he finds it, maybe it can help guide him the truth. But here's the reason I point this out is because there's a lot of people that make claims that have no source for their claim. And if you ask questions, a lot of times you can find out what is the source similar, what is the context, right? Did Jefferson actually write separation church and state? Yes. But in the letter, the context of the letter is not that we are not going to let any religion be in government. That's not the context of the letter. What is the context? And then also, is that all he said about the issue? Because sometimes they'll say, yeah, but like Jefferson was so anti-religious because Jefferson wrote a letter where he said that reading through the Pauline epistles was like searching through a dunghill trying to find a diamond because he thought the Apostle Paul was full of crap. Now, it's literally what Jefferson wrote, okay? Did he write that? Yes, he did. But is that all he wrote? No. Jefferson wrote tens of thousands of letters. There's about 600 of them where he explicitly talks about faith, religion, the Bible, Christianity. In those 600, there's only 1 to 2 dozen letters, about 15 to 20 letters, where he actually says anything negative or critical about the Bible or Christianity. And all of those letters came in about the last 10 years of his life. Now, why does that matter? Because if you have a grandparent that's in the nursing home, you're not going to be like, you're never going to believe what Grandpa told me today, right? He said all this crazy stuff. We're like, okay, Grandpa's a lunatic. Like, no. When people get older, they lose a filter on their mouth, and sometimes they say things that's not consistent with who they were their whole life. Now, this doesn't mean that Jefferson didn't know what he was writing at the end of his life. I'm just saying that there should be a consideration and a balance to say, is that all he wrote? No. The vast majority of what almost everything he wrote through his life, up until the very end of his life, when he and John Adams starts writing these letters back and forth with their two grumpy old men, like that's the first time you see this. Is there more context? Let me give you some bonus thoughts. Bonus thoughts, are they making generalizations or giving specific examples? Well, all the founding fathers were racist. That's a generalization. None of the founding fathers believed in God. It's a generalization, right? What are the specific examples? Let's be more specific. Are the people they're quoting consistent with other founding fathers? You might be able to say, well, wait a second, right? We know that Thomas Paine hated Christianity. Therefore, all the founding fathers did. Okay, was Thomas Paine consistent with the other founding fathers? No. I mean, not even close. I don't have time to go into it. But the point is, I want to know, is this a view that we find in all the founders' writings? Or is this something that only you find in 1 or 2 people's writings? Or do the quotes contradict other times in their lives? Again, like Jefferson. Right? Are there quotes that you find in their life that contradict other times? Yes, because in people's life, there can be a roller coaster in their life of their journey. This is the reality for everybody. Here's what I'm going to encourage and leave you with. We are in an era in the world that people are struggling to identify truth. Truth is found in God's word, right? Ultimately, God is truth. Jesus, right? He is the way, the truth, and the life. The hope for the world is in Jesus, which means that for us as believers, we are the only ones that have the answers for hope that people are looking for, but also truth is under attack in our culture like never before, and we have to be prepared. The Apostle Paul says, be prepared to give a defense for everyone that asks the reason for the hope that's in you. The word defense is the word apologia, which is where we get the word apologetics. You need to know what you believe and why you believe it, but also understand that a lot of the criticisms that come against this nation, it's not that America's perfect, but most of the criticism that comes against America, it's not rooted and based in historic fact and understanding. And in order for you to not believe a lie, you have to know the truth. You overcome lies with the truth. You need to know the truth of American history, the truth of the Bible. And part of how you can determine what's truth and a lie is just start learning to ask some basic questions to help you navigate all that's there. I've been talking a long time. Thank you guys for being such a patient audience and crowd. And there's 2 people with Chick-fil-A gift cards. Maybe they can buy you a drink, right? Other than that, I will turn it back over to whoever's in charge. I don't know who that is. I was told the hour goes to 11:50. What class did I get you out of? Bible? Okay, well that didn't help you. Physics? Somebody said? You're welcome. Spanish? Okay. Muy bien, that's all I got for you. Right? All right, God bless you guys. We'll see you later.